This video will tell you everything you need to know about sustainable fashion, what sustainable fashion is, how the current fast fashion industry works, how that affects you and others, why you should care, and what you can do about it. So let's get into it. What is sustainable fashion? I'm sure you will have heard the words sustainable and sustainability before, and I know that a lot of people see the word sustainable as a problematic word because it can be down to personal definition. But at the end of the day, I still think it's the best word we've got. Sustainable fashion really stands for considerate and ethical manufacturing, for fair treatment of people and animals, and for compassion and respect for the earth and everyone on it. Now, traditionally, sustainability is defined using the 3 Ps: planet, people, and profits. And they all come together and they form a sustainable economy, a sustainable fashion industry, a sustainable world. But personally, I have a big problem with one of those 3 Ps, the profit part, because the endless pursuit of economic growth is inherently unsustainable. It enables unethical practices, it promotes monopolies, and furthers social inequality. And at the end of the day, I see economic sustainability as an extension of social responsibility, where fair wages, support for artisans and skilled workers, and local employment help communities and economies thrive. Both the current economic and fashion industry models are extremely linear. Something is made, it's used, then it's discarded. But sustainable fashion really looks towards a more circular model, where something is made, then it's used, it's mended, it's upcycled, it's recycled, it's swapped, it's shared, and hopefully it never ends up being discarded at all. The current fashion industry, fast fashion included, harms people, animals, and the planet. And at the manufacturing stages, these problems are slightly easier to spot. From the very first step, when the fibers are being farmed that turn into fabrics and make our clothes, there are already huge issues. Toxic chemicals are used in pesticides and fertilizers, and not only do those harm the health of the farmers, but they also leach into nearby waterways and pollute them, making the water undrinkable. Farmers work hard, long hours with absolutely minimal pay, and they're constantly being exploited by huge corporations that sell them genetically modified seeds and force them to sign agreements that they won't keep any of those seeds for the next year, which means that farmers are constantly dependent on those same huge corporations for the next year's crop. They're then forced to sell all of their fibers at way below market value, and they're thus trapped in an endless cycle under the poverty line, from which many see no escape but to end their lives. Once those fibers reach factories to be spun, woven, and sewn into fabrics, there are further issues. Garment workers work in factories with absolutely no health and safety under abusive and dangerous conditions. In fact, garments are the second highest at-risk product category for modern slavery, and worldwide, 152 million children are engaged in child labor, many of those in the fashion industry. 80% of garment workers are women, and that is not an accident. Speaking to Labour Behind the Label, a female Bangladeshi garment worker said, "Women can be made to dance like puppets, but men cannot be abused in the same way. The owners do not care if we ask for something, but demands raised by the men must be given some consideration, so they do not employ male workers." Meanwhile, 80% of garment workers in Bangladesh say that they've either experienced or witnessed sexual violence and harassment at work, and 90% say that their job is negatively impacting their health. Now, it's easy to look at all these issues and say that that's down to the local culture, traditions, politics, and laws, but really, it's our own fashion industry, our own need for fast and affordable fashion that necessitates this kind of exploitation. At the dyeing stages, the worker's health is compromised even further. Bleach is used widely to whiten fabrics, and the most common kind of dyes, azo dyes, are known to be carcinogenic. They can cause lung and breast cancer in the workers. Other chemicals used, like formaldehyde, can't even be washed out, so it can cause dermatitis and skin irritation in the wearer, but also asthma and cancer in the workers. The finishing stages are also where child labor is most common, especially for small hand-sewing work like detailed embroidery or attaching sequins. And let's not forget the huge environmental impact of each of these stages. The waterways that are poisoned, the fields that take over natural landscapes and turn them into monocultures, the animals that are mistreated and abused. But the horrible effects of the fashion industry are not limited to developing countries. In January 2020, 10,000 garment workers were found in Leicester, England, living under conditions of modern slavery. This all despite the Modern Slavery Act, which has been in force since 2015. And of course, there are warehouse workers, delivery people, anybody that works in a fashion store, models, designers, and us, the consumers. We're all part of the life cycle of clothing. We're all part of the fashion industry, and it affects us in more ways than we realize. The entire industry is riddled with systemic issues of racism, sexism, modern slavery, abuse, poverty, and exploitation. So, how does fast fashion affect us, the consumers? Well, we've already mentioned dyes and toxic chemicals that can affect the wearer and cause skin irritations. And of course, there are general issues with bad quality, bad design, and fit. But a lot of the problems are quite a bit more abstract than that. Inclusivity is a big problem in the fashion industry, from body positivity and the inclusion of plus sizing and disabilities as well, to racism, racial discrimination in models, racist advertising, appropriation of designs, and whitewashing. Sexism is also a huge issue. There's a great deal of femininity thrust upon women through the fashion industry, and a lot of sexism in the design of garments as well. The gender binary that is enforced through the different designs of garments really doesn't leave a lot of room for non-binary people, or simply people that want to dress in a non-gendered way. Did you know that the reason that women's jeans don't have pockets, or they have those really tiny fake little pocket slits, is because designers didn't want to take away from the female form, so men's jeans have practical usable pockets, and we're left with just little fakes. I mean, look at this guy. How happy does he look lounging there with his whole hand in his pocket? Meanwhile, this just looks uncomfortable. The unrealistic representation and lack of inclusivity in the fashion industry has been shown to also lead to mental health issues, from low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, to body dysmorphia and even eating disorders. And in fact, the fashion industry also has a bearing on our personal finance. Nowadays, whether you're going to school or work, you're expected to wear a specific kind of clothing to fit in and be respected. And although clothing is generally affordable, it also doesn't last very long, so the cost per wear is actually astronomically high. Shopping has become a hobby, and you're seen as somehow lesser if you can't take part in it, or simply if you don't want to. At the end of the day, the fashion industry affects all of us. If you are a woman, a man, non-binary, too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too old, Asian, black, disabled, or simply not a millionaire, the current fashion industry does not work for you. If you wear clothes, the fashion industry affects you. The good news is that also means you can affect it. So why should you care? Well, let's take a look at this sentence. Sustainable fashion stands for considerate and ethical manufacturing, for fair treatment of people and animals, for compassion and respect for the earth and everyone on it. How can anyone read that and disagree? How can you see that and think, that's not what I want? The topic of sustainability in fashion is so much bigger than just the clothes, where they were made and what they were made from. And really, the more you look into it, the bigger it becomes. It has to be viewed as part of a larger framework, a larger issue and solution, because it involves so many other systemic, ethical, environmental, and societal issues. Pollution, extinction, depletion of natural resources, modern slavery, racism, sexism, exploitation, overconsumption. It's impossible to talk about sustainability without also addressing those issues. At the end of the day, sustainability is about ethics. What do you want the world to look like? It can be overwhelming and difficult to know where to start. It can often feel like we're just one drop in the ocean trying to make a wave alone. But in this case, as the consumers, we have the power to change the industry. So what can we do about it? Sustainability is all about taking responsibility. For decades, we've been taking advantage of the earth, its resources, and marginalized people, all for our own benefit, and now is the time to take responsibility and make it right. Now, recently, a lot of us are being called to make changes in our personal lives to become more sustainable, and those are valuable, but they're really not enough. A lot of people can't make those changes. There isn't the infrastructure to allow it, and in a lot of cases, like in the middle of a global pandemic, it's just straight up impossible. Somehow, giant corporations have managed to convince us that personal change is the way forward, and that really isn't the case. This has never been more obvious than now, after weeks of worldwide lockdown. People are working from home, not using their cars, not flying, and that has made a difference. But that difference is minimal, nothing compared to the change we need. We need systemic change, driven by consumers, because those in power who are able to make these changes just straight up don't care. We have to care. We have to put ourselves in those uncomfortable positions. We have to stand up for the people that we've been taking advantage of, and we have to demand the changes that we want to see. Now, activism can be a scary word, but it's not all about protests and boycotts. Mending a rip in your jeans instead of throwing them out is activism. Talking to others about these issues is activism. Contacting someone in power and asking for change is activism. We need to make sure that we're elevating and amplifying the voices of those who are hit the most by climate change and affected the most by the fashion industry in order to ensure equitable change. On this channel, I'll be talking all things sustainable fashion, from how the current industry works, to changes we can make in our own lives, systemic changes we can look for, activism, what small brands can do, and so much more. So stick around! Hit the subscribe button to see more videos like this, click the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video, like this video to support the channel, and leave a comment below and let me know what questions you want me to answer in my next video. Thanks for watching! Check out these other videos YouTube thinks you'll like, or come follow me on Instagram for more daily content.